discussion. I want to tee off this panel with a couple of questions. How does data create and support opportunities for partnering to accelerate research progress and therapy development? And then, what lessons can we learn from advocates and scientists? So we have three excellent speakers today with us, and let me give them an introduction. So first on my right, we have Emily Bonkowski, genetic counselor and research program coordinator at St. Jude. And then to her left, we have Alex Gillett, a Ph.D. who is a board member on the Wiedemann-Steiner Syndrome Foundation and also a rare mom. And then Jeff D'Angelo, who is president and founder of the Champ1 Foundation and a rare dad. So welcome all of you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give each of our speakers 6 or 7 minutes to give a little bit of background on their work. And then we'll have a little bit of Q&A, and I'm hoping that we have, oh, we do have the 45, awesome. So we'll have, I'll have a few questions and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions as well. So I am going to start with, I guess we'll go audience, is it audience right? Jeff, would you like to start us out? You can sit or stand, either way.
Hi, everybody. Excited to be here and grateful for Charlene and Dora and everyone with Global Genes for all you do for not only Champ1, but rare disease as a whole. I think 6 years ago, I got a diagnosis from my son, who was the 37th kid in the world diagnosed with Champ1. And how I spent the next few weeks was on the phone with people and somehow walked into a conference, this very conference, like a complete deer in headlights. And I didn't know what I was walking into, what to expect. Didn't know anything about rare disease, let alone registries. And I'm super thankful that I was greeted by some of the most amazing people, these super parents, these compassionate doctors who have took me under their wing, gave me advice, and sort of been in my corner this whole way through. But as far as the landscape of Champ1 went, there was a registry. It wasn't necessarily the best fit, and I won't go into detail about why, but it wasn't a long-term solution for our community. And I know at that time, the idea of Rare X existed, it just wasn't necessarily in motion yet. So we were patient, and naturally enough, we were one of the pilot groups, and we were excited to do that. And I was very involved at the beginning on the onboarding process, but the goal was for me not to be involved in it. We elected a mom who's a nurse, who's awesome, and she was really the patient registry lead. And what we're seeing now is how difficult that is for one person to do if it's not full-time. You really need a team of people. You need people that can be organized, and they genuinely have to want to reach out to the community and form relationships. And that's an ongoing process and a lot of work. And you have to meet families where they're at. And that's sort of what we're realizing now. And we've started over the last couple months, me and Stephanie have been sort of strategizing, trying to bring more people on. And it's kind of a good thing this came up because all these ideas are in our head. And I could share a couple of things that have worked and what has been some major challenges as well. It's certainly not easy, and we definitely don't have all the answers. But educating our families, not everybody necessarily feels the way I do. I want to be like research ready. I have all this energy and urgency when it comes to things like this. But some of these families, you have to meet them exactly where they're at. And that might be they're not aware that the data can be used for an IEP meeting, and they're trying to get services, and they're just trying to have better quality of life for their children. But I don't think they're all aware of the different things that can be utilized through RareX data. We just had a situation with a mom who she went to see a neurologist, and the doctor didn't necessarily dismiss her, but didn't know how to handle it because there was no publications on Champ1 and seizures. So this sparked a conversation. We use Facebook as our platform to communicate with one another. And this got everybody going. I was happy because she was super aggressive about it, but it got people talking. And all the moms that have children with seizures said, okay, we'll sign up for RareX now because we see the value in that. So there's more to it than just the research aspect of data. The next thing that was probably the most helpful for our community, and we have a global community. We have families scattered throughout the entire world. And we don't have one primary clinician. So we try to basically solicit this to everybody and hope that we have scientists who want to pull our data. And when we did, that created such an urgency in our group. And I think the more you could do that, you could, even if it's not somebody that's necessarily working on it, but just to put their face out there, someone that's reputable in the community, that's willing to make a video to jump on a Zoom with families and just explain the significance of contributing data. It really, for our community, was probably one of the most impactful things. The last thing I'll just comment, I know I'm running low on time, and this one was kind of like silly to me, is incentivizing our families. Like, for me, like, I know it's important, and I feel like everybody in the community should know it's important, because we say it's important every other day. But for them, things like contests, and for the month of May, we're going to give a Champ One hoodie out to everybody who participates. Those are kind of the things that get some families that you wouldn't think to participate to get involved. And we're trying to find ways to make it fun, because the family burnout is real. Some of these families, a shower at the end of the days of victory and taking another survey is not something they want to do. So we're trying to discover ways to have urgency, but yet make it fun. Grab a glass of wine and jump on a Zoom call with us. We're all in this together. So that's been our big challenge, is navigating through this to get parents to realize that you don't get patient data without patients, and your Facebook data is not validated. If you want results and better clinical care, you guys have to use RareX. If I have 30 seconds, I'll just comment on the difficulty of engaging researchers. Our goal is just to stay in front of them. We have quarterly calls, and I know Megan and Vanessa have been on them, and I'm soon to Pastor Zora as well, where they're just kind of giving updates to our scientists about the different statistics about our community and sort of where we are, and we're just kind of hoping we could find some ways where it makes sense for them to get involved when they can. So, that's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Alex?
I think I need my clicker.
And a slide.
All right, we got it. And this is working. Excellent. So yeah, hi, I'm Alex. I'm not lucky enough to be a geneticist. I'm just an entomologist, so just explaining that PhD. So I'm also a rare mom. My son was diagnosed in September 21 with Wiedemann-Steiner, and ever since then, being a scientist, I was always kind of like, okay, who's doing the work on this? Where can I find more information? Who's gathering the information? I immediately went on to the group's Facebook and was saying, like, is anyone gathering this data? Because everyone on here is always asking, hey, how common is this symptom? Hey, how common is that symptom? Every single day. So someone must be gathering this information. Finally, someone from our foundation kind of said, hey, we're working on this. We're gonna start working with RareX. So eventually, a few months ago now, in January, I joined the foundation as a board member, and so now I'm helping our foundation work with RareX and getting those patients doing surveys. So super briefly about Wiedemann-Steiner, it's a KMT2A mutation. It's a disease of a gene that controls some epigenetic machinery, so it affects a broad spectrum of parts of the body and development. I figured it would be fun to just use our RareX data to show all the different areas that are affected. So it's quite broad and quite diverse, different people expressing it differently. So having this data is quite important. Also, really briefly, I guess many of our PAGs are pretty new with the recent uptick in genetic testing, but 2015 was when it began, and eventually we wanted to find a way somewhere that was going to be doing this sort of data collection. So we fairly recently joined RX. And so the data collection program started in 2022, which was right after we got our diagnosis. I was on the receiving end of all the advertising for joining RX, and being a scientist, I was very excited to fill out surveys, but I realized most people were not. So talking to my predecessors about what they did, and also being on the receiving end of a lot of the push to join, we tried to use synced deadlines that were related to something like our Diseases Day, our conference, which was that year, looking for messaging of why this is important, getting some of the key researchers, some of the names that people have heard. Oh, this researcher has done a little bit of work on the disease, them to come and give kind of video webinars, and then kind of tout the importance of this. And then consistently engaging in the social media and kind of pushing people into please filling out one survey, 2 surveys, couple surveys. So I can't take credit for this beautiful graphic, but one of my foundation members produced a graphic of their effort and kind of where the touch points were for increasing participation. And we also, stealing a nice graphic from RX as well, locations of participants. We feel like it's very important to try to reach out, and this is one of the things we liked about RX, that they're conscious of the effort to make sure there's multiple language access. So in 2024, we're also working with RX on the research roadmap program. And we're very excited about the burden of illness survey that just came out to help inform our research goals, because we're at the point now where we want to know what our patients most would like us to spend the money on that people have been donating to the foundation. So what should we be focusing on? More broad things, symptom-specific things, et cetera. So we're excited that that's rolling out, and we're about to do a big push to get some more information there. We also want to use it to bolster the limited information that's out there for our families. And eventually we would like to work with Global Genes to publish some of this data so that it's out there. The biggest cohort that's out there on a research paper right now, as far as I can tell, is 104 individuals. Right now we have 189 patients registered in RareX, so if we can get them to a higher survey completion rate, that would be 81% more than the biggest data set right now, which would be very exciting. We're also excited to get a standard of care produced for our disease. There's indications this may come to fruition this fall. We hope, if our research friends will get it done, but hopefully they'll be able to use some of the RareX data to inform that when they do finalize it. I think that's it. Yes.
Go ahead, Emily.
All right. Can you hear me? Yeah. Nice to see everyone and some familiar faces. Thanks for inviting me to join this panel of great patient and parent advocates. I'm a genetic counselor and research coordinator at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and I'll talk a little bit more about the work that we do and our perspective on some of these patient-reported outcomes. I have too many slides, so I'm going to try to breeze through them. All right, so just to give you some context, I'm housed within the Pediatric Translational Neurosciences Initiative, and this is a fairly new initiative within the last 5 years to kind of take the mission of St. Jude to find better treatments and improve quality of life with children, historically in cancer, to other catastrophic pediatric diseases, including neurological conditions. So we are housed under our PI and faculty member is Dr. Heather Mefford, who some of you might know, but she's a pediatric geneticist, a molecular geneticist, and she has a medical genetics laboratory within the Center for Pediatric Neurologic Disease Research, which is kind of the basic science arm of the PTNI. We also see patients in a neurogenetics clinic in Memphis. This was set up about a year ago at Le Bonheur Children's Hospital. And I just want to highlight the kind of counterparts to CPNDR. These are the Center for Experimental Neurotherapeutics and the Office of Strategy and Alliances. Bridget Lyons is here. I don't know if she knew that I would call her out, but if you have questions about the PTNI, check us out online or find one of us or email us for more information. All right, so within the Mefford lab, we have kind of a feedback loop for translational research. We see patients in our neurogenetics clinic, and we also enroll participants with rare and undiagnosed pediatric epilepsies through research, both to collect clinical information, but also to collect biosamples that feed into our research pipeline. We have bioinformaticists and kind of data scientists who work with that genomic data for gene discovery, as well as other omic data and clinical data to really characterize diseases. And we have a nice set of scientists and students working on functional studies with disease-relevant models and patient-derived cells and neurons and cool brain organoids, and trying to understand disease mechanisms and find new targets and develop gene-targeted therapies. As a genetic counselor, I'm kind of partial to this patient and research participant arm. And kind of realizing that the better information we have about our patients, the better the downstream research will be. And really central to this are our rare disease partnerships and long-term collaboration and relationships. All right, so I just want to briefly talk about clinical trial readiness, which is something that I think we all think about, especially in research. Thinking about what do we have and what else do we need. Patient-reported outcomes are a really central part of this, but there are other kinds of outcomes as well that are measured. I just want to highlight this kind of figure from the FDA about the different kinds of clinical outcome assessments. So we might think of just things that are measured by clinicians in clinics, or by things that are observed, or certain tasks that are measured, but patient-reported outcomes are a really central part of the way that we measure clinical outcomes in both understanding disease and then informing downstream therapies. So there are a bunch of challenges in patient-reported outcomes and other outcomes in figuring out what should be measured, what's important, what do clinicians think is important. There are small numbers. So traditional clinical trials include hundreds, if not thousands, of patients, and in rare disease, we just don't have that. There are geographic barriers to getting kids access to like urban medical centers where they can get an expert assessment or even a genetic diagnosis, both around the country and around the world. Scales that work in one population might not work in another population, so what do we do about that? What's meaningful to families that they want to observe at home for improvement might be different than what clinicians or pharmaceutical companies say or say that they can measure. Longitudinal data collection is difficult. Sometimes this data is collected multiple times by different, by patient advocacy group measures or by multiple different researchers over time. And then as has been alluded to earlier, this takes a lot of time from families. Families are already, caring for children with complex medical needs, and adding more surveys and more surveys, when they feel like they've already answered these questions or it's in their medical record, can feel like a burden. I'm not going to go through each of these, but these are some of the things that we think about as translational researchers when we think about incorporating patient-reported outcomes into the research that we do and understanding disease spectrums, genetic variants, genotype, phenotype. I'm excited to hear the next Open Data Science will focus on that, and maybe we'll take that challenge on. And some other kind of questions that can be asked of this data and incorporated to what we're already doing. I just want to give a brief example. Last year, we partnered with the Coalition to Cure CHD2. CHD2 is a neurodevelopmental disorder that most children experience seizures, can have developmental delays, communication challenges, behavioral challenges. This was really driven by Stephanie Prince, who really wanted us to do this and partner with us. She's a rare disease mom and physician. She's a CHD2 mom and physician in the UK. So we took this as a way to kind of motivate ourselves to see what was in the data set and what we could learn. Just some initial analysis that we did. This was comparing CHD2 to the rest of the data set, the RareX data set, which has other neurodevelopmental conditions and epilepsies. So we found, unsurprisingly, that kids with CHD2 have a bunch of seizures, and the rest of the cohort had lower seizure numbers. This is quite small, but related to behaviors, and we can see that kids with CHD2 have more reported percentage of difficult behaviors compared to the rest of the cohort. We made this little heat map to see what symptoms are co-occurring, which can help us inform downstream research. And then I'll toot our own horn here a little bit, but we were one of the winners of the third challenge, which was, I think, felt good for us and for CHD2 to feel like we accomplished something. All right, so we have a couple other projects and ongoing with RareX and incorporating it into the basic science that we do, which I think is a little bit unique, but having collected samples and having biological data, we can use the PRO data that's collected through RareX to really understand genotype, phenotype, and kind of downstream studies. I just want to highlight some of the rare disease organizations that we've been able to work with and how important those partnerships are. These are just a few projects. These are just a few rare disease organizations, and there's so much work to be done. But we're, trying to chip away at it. Thanks. This is just a picture of our lab last year at the CHD2 day. Thanks.
Thank you all. Wonderful overviews. Can you turn that down, Ryan? So I wanted to start the Q&A part of our panel. And Jeff, I wanted to start with you. You in your last 30 seconds of your comments, kind of breezed through how you're engaging your researchers. And it would be great to learn more about that. How have you been able to leverage the RareX data to create more researcher engagement, and what kind of projects, if any, have you started to be able to support within the research community?
Sure. So without force feeding them, when we're engaging on these quarterly calls, we're trying to stay in front of them about it. And something that's not necessarily in my DNA. If it wasn't for my son or for this mission, I wouldn't. But I'm very comfortable asking people for things if you don't know that by now. And I've reached out to just about anyone who it makes sense on whether or not they would start a project or if they're interested in. So I think that's important. If you don't have the funding to have a clinician do this, then all you have is you have to make yourself as marketable as possible. So we're trying to increase our numbers and stay in front of our research community, let them know what we're doing, and then engage with them when we think a relationship makes sense with them, pulling our data and potentially doing a project.
Have you, I think that there's a project that you're
Sure.
working on with a mouse also, with developing a mouse model?
So we have a doctor who just phenotyped 2 of our mouse models. And the idea, we've been speaking about this for years now, was to compare it to our human data. That was something that's just starting to take place. And then earlier last year, there was a doctor in Italy who did a very small paper and phenotyped the different mutations we had in our community. So she wasn't aware of what existed out there. We sort of reached out to her, made a relationship, and now she's one of the other doctors she's looking to expand on that study, and she's using the RareX data to do it.
Thank you. Alex, I wanted to ask you about your, up and to the right, beautiful curve in terms of your recruitment for your foundation's recruitment for WSS. What would you say that, was the most important thing for your community to be able to be effective? And I know you had that slide with a number of learnings, but what do you think has taken you? Because at the end of December, you were at, I think, 112, and you're now at 180, which means you're actually continuing to accelerate recruitment.
I think one of the things is to continuing are having webinars, which are it's drawing, families in to listen, because they're, the webinars are sharing information from particular researchers that they want to hear, but kind of pairing that with reminders of research can continue on if you would please fill out surveys and participate. So there's that. There's also, I guess we try not to continuously ask all the time for them to fill out surveys, but we do try to have a couple of focus times a year where we try to do a push, where there's some end goal saying, we want to have this output, and if you want to be part of that output, the deadline is now. So having a deadline is important. I know, at least for me, if it's not due for another couple weeks, it's not going to be really on my radar until the last minute, we all know, especially being a rare parent. So having a deadline is important with reminders, but I think that was what was important in getting those numbers to continue rising.
Congratulations. And Emily, I had a question for you, because you talked about patient-reported outcomes, and I think that was a great list that you put up around the challenges. And I wanted to turn it around and ask you about what is the value of patient-reported outcomes. And you made a comment also about being able to use the insights and downstream. And how does that happen specifically? Like, what does that mean?
Sure. So I think for the first part of the question, sorry, can you say it again?
Sorry, I shouldn't have done that as a compound question. But
what's different about the Rare X data?
Yeah. Well, what are the? So you talked about the challenges
Mm-hmm.
with PROs, and definitely there are challenges. But I think the flipping it around and asking you what's the opportunity that PROs create? What's the value?
Sure. So let's start there. So I think no data set is really perfect. We know that medical records are not perfect. Clinicians add ICD-10 codes, don't really know what the downstream impact of that is. Seizures are hard to capture, both clinically on EEG, but maybe families are noticing things that aren't present in hospitals. I think the other part of PROs is that when we think about case studies, we're often looking for the most common symptoms across the whole cohort, but perhaps they're missing some unique things. So something with sleep, something in the GI issue, scoliosis. So I think having parents think about those things, and maybe just not the most common things that we already know about these rare conditions, we're able to find kind of new associations or new things over time. It's also helpful to see patients in different age groups. So I think this patient-reported data set really is able to capture that. And then the second part of your question of how do we use this downstream?
Yeah, exactly, because you made this comment, and then I wanted to hear more around this data that's generated through RareX, and also combining it with other data can be used downstream. And so what is that, how does your group use it, and how do you see generally it being able to power research?
Sure. So I think our group uses it as we're trying to just as CHD2 as an example, understand the spectrum and kind of the boundaries of what we can see. We're trying to combine multiple different data sets to see, are they telling us the same thing? Are they telling us different things? And what does that mean for what else we should be looking for? Should kids be having other evaluations? Are adult patients experiencing different things? The standardization of outcome measures is so critical. I think we spend a long time trying to find the right measure, or reinventing a measure in a specific disease group that works really well, but that doesn't necessarily translate to other disease groups. So I think having standardized data collected, and I think RAREX is really thoughtful about this and the outcome measures that they include, like the neuro, quality of life, or other things that can capture more of the spectrum of things that we see with our kids who might be, pretty severe. So I think those kinds of things are important, of really having a standard so we get a good grasp of what we have and what we know as new therapies become available, and we need to figure out whether or not they work.
Thank you. So in a couple minutes, we're going to open it up to audience questions, and I think there's a mic that's going to be available walking around, so if people want to raise your hand. But I'll ask one or two more questions before that. So I wanted to ask Alex a question about this burden of illness, because it connects into what Emily was talking about. Can you talk a little bit more about what the what your team is expecting to get out of the burden of illness? And because not everybody actually might be familiar with that term.
Sure. So I think the importance to us of the burden of illness survey is that you can see all, the data of what the most common symptoms are that most people have, but that doesn't really tell you the day-to-day impact on the family. If the most common symptom is something that's more easily manageable, but there's something less common that's takes up more time, more effort, causes more difficulty for a family. That's probably what that family would like us to help research and resolve first. So the burden of illness survey, we're hoping, will help us to understand what to prioritize now that we're focusing in a little bit more on where to put money toward researchers, what we should be focusing on.
That's great. And I can just also share from my personal experience, because I'm very passionate about burden of illness. So in my daughter's disorder, we were able to leverage data from multiple sources to start the process of a disease concept model, which is kind of the same process. And through that, so my daughter has a neurodevelopmental disorder. It's not surprising that all of us on stage are people who are working on neurodevelopmental disorders, since we have, and I'm going to get the number wrong, but Vanessa, over 30 disorders that are neurodevelopmental disorders that are collecting data on the RareX platform. And so when we did this disease concept model, one of the things that was very surprising was that even though STXBP1 is a very impactful seizure disorder, the most impactful symptom for families was communication. Because it has such broad impact from an activities of daily living standpoint, so it was very interesting to see how impact or burden wasn't necessarily the same as frequency, and then we were able to take that and move it forward into a publication for the disease concept model. And we just actually completed our patient-focused drug development meeting with the FDA. And so this is incredibly powerful data that is really important from a patient voice perspective, kind of tying it back to your point, Emily. So thank you. So I have a question for Jeff, and then after that, we're going to go ahead and open it up to, was this 45? I'm just going to keep going until we get kicked off of the stage. So we're okay? Okay. So Jeff, you brought up this point around that data that is being collected can be used beyond research, and tying that back into value for families. Can you talk a little bit more in specific around the value from a care standpoint, and how RareX data can be utilized to forward families' needs?
Sure. Just to piggyback what you mentioned, in our Facebook support group, you get the same questions over and over and over and over and over and again. And it's always, you could do that, you could do this. And as I'm 6 years in, I'm becoming a little more blunt. Maybe I'm not the person that should be, you know, reaching out to everybody, because I'm starting to get a little more straightforward. But yeah, these families want better clinical care. They want answers, but like I mentioned, it's not validated through Facebook. So that's important. I think families want better clinical care. There's always those topics that we went to the doctor, they knew nothing. We had to tell them everything, and we all have those experiences when it's a rare disease. So if they want change, they have to participate. If you don't contribute data about patients, there's no data. So that's sort of the struggle. I don't know if I answered that entirely, but.
I was curious also in terms of, do you have specific plans for utilizing the data that's coming out of RareX to then, you know, help the community with the care part?
We don't do this enough, but we need to start that you guys can pull certain surveys or like pie charts and graphs. And just as those topics come up, we want to be able to kind of instantly gratify them so they know they're getting value out of what they're seeing, you know? So for sure, something we need to do a better job of. It's in our plan going forward.
So I know I said I was going to open it up to questions, but I have one more question that follows up. Sorry. But I know that we just had the user group, so this is a little bit out of sequence, but I'm just curious because what you said is that, you know, it would be great to do more of this. What kind of, is there something from a, you know, kind of support and enablement standpoint that would be great to, you know, get help from our team?
In terms of pulling the surveys and stuff like that?
Well, I'm making it a general question, but if it's that specific as an answer, that's great.
Opening it up there, I don't know. If you want to hear my list here. No,
The short list, the short.
No, geez, I don't know if that's a broad question or maybe I'm taking it wrong. I think the easier we can make things for families, and I don't know, maybe have one thing in specific right now, I could definitely get back to you. Maybe you'll regret this later, but yeah, the easier we can make things for families on a case-by-case basis, I think the more value you'll see of it. I don't have one particular example off the top of my head.
Thank you. Any thoughts, Alex? I know my team is probably going to kill me for asking this question on stage.
I mean, so before I actually joined the board of our foundation, I was volunteering to help with some of the RareX back and forth between the foundation, and actually found it like quite easy to request data. I requested quite a lot of data and got all of that, and it was, you know, helped formatting it and stuff. And I was very excited that we could pull data and then actually show the families, like, look, here's a summary of all our data, and you guys are in this, and then also people curiously being, oh, where did this come from? How can I be involved in this? But yeah, I thought it was fairly easy. I think there's some help that I needed a little bit in like folders and things and getting started, but in terms of just as one of the patients, I guess I would be interested to see that information kind of updated regularly. I know that's very hard logistically, but if it was me as the person in the foundation who can request the data at any time, great. Imagine if I was outside looking in, I would want to be able to, oh, what's the latest? But I know that's incredibly difficult to think about. Like,
yeah, but it's good to hear it, and you know, then we can, you know, figure out you know, ways to start getting closer to that. But you're right. I think a virtuous cycle, right, in terms of data generates interest, which, you know, increases people's desire to participate. So thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience?
While they're looking, can I just add to this as a researcher? So I think one challenge to try to get researchers involved is the kind of startup cost of trying to figure out how the data works and what's in there. the RareX team has been super supportive, and I've gotten a lot of one-on-one help, but I think I'm not a software engineer, but I think this kind of big data could use some like more data structure support, so it's a little bit easier for researchers to access and clean, really see what's in there and what's not in there. That's just an ideal dream world.
Well, that's great. Thank you. And then Mackenzie, I thought, go ahead.
Hi there. So my question is, I wonder if there's any resource or any hints you could give about when families are registering and they're going through, reading this, how they're going to share their or let their data be shared. I sometimes think like, I understand it because I've come to a few conferences now, but if you're not familiar with the language that's being used, I think it can feel very daunting to families. So I'm wondering if there's any like layperson way I could, something I could point them to or way of explaining. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I may pull up Caitlin from our community engagement team, but I wanted to ask, Alex and Jeff, have y'all encountered that? Have y'all encountered that? People feeling like they needed some more explanation around, consent and what it means? And then I will also get someone from the RareX team to share.
I haven't actually noticed anyone, at least in our social media circles, asking that. Although I seem to remember being on the receiving end of a very good, I thought, explanation of what the different options were, perhaps at our meeting, watching some of the webinars that was delivered directly from one of your team, which I thought was sufficient rather than reading through the thing myself. So I think there was some sort of video I watched about it.
And I'll just add that we are able to do continued engagement for your community. So if you'd like us to get on a call and we can walk them through why we have a consent, what the consent means, because it is very long and very extensive. And then really, if there's ever any questions, you can reach out to support, and we're able to communicate directly with patients to help educate them further.
Okay.
Thank you.
We actually have time for one more question because we need to move to the next session. This side of the room. Get it this side of the room.
Hi. So I am a parent. My son was the second child ever diagnosed with his disorder. And I know it says partnership. I remember calling St. Jude's and them telling me there was nothing they can do and they wished me the best of luck. So Emily, I was wondering, is there a way you can partner with my organization to help? Because one of the things that I do focus on is bridging the gap in racial disparities in research as well as healthcare. And I remember calling and I was like, my son had seen 27 doctors, 3 misdiagnoses before he even flown out to the NIH. So I was wondering if we could partner so we no other parent won't feel what I felt, because that wish you the best of luck was like embedded in my brain from everybody.
I'm sorry to hear that was your experience, and happy to talk to you more about how we're aligning with parents. And I think we would love to hear more about your son and your work in racial disparities and research. It sounds, right down our alley. And if there's not, a specific research project that we're working on now, we can talk about other opportunities going forward. But happy to. I'm blinded by these lights, but if you can find me afterwards.
And Emily, I think it's probably worthwhile, that you showed it on kind of your slide with the brain and all of the areas, but CHD2 is only one of the genes that your team works on.
Yep. And we have other researchers and other pathways, so it's probably just a matter of connecting you to the right person. St. Jude just might have some, blanket messaging that they give to folks with questions, but We can connect you with the right people.
Okay. Okay. Well, we
Love
do
making connections.
and we do have to wrap it up.
All right, I think we are getting the hook. So thank you all.